Hey, have you recently lost a pet and are you surprised by how sad you are? Did you not expect it to be this hard and this heavy? Are the people around you telling you that you're overreacting? Well, don't worry. Losing a pet is actually a bigger deal than what you think. Today, we're going to talk about the unspoken pain of losing a pet and 5 reasons why it's a bigger deal than you might have thought. Hey guys, I'm Kelly Nielsen here with Grace for Living After Loss, and this channel is dedicated to everything grief recovery. What does it look like, feel like, but most importantly for you, we share tips, tools, and resources on how to move through your pain and get back to living a life that you love. And as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about pet loss specifically, why it's such a big deal. And please watch until the end because we're going to share the #1 tip for dealing with pet loss in your personal life or in your family, how to navigate it. I'm super thrilled to have Lindy Carter with me, one of our Grace for Living After Loss coaches, and she has a long, extensive background in hospice care and all things related to loss, and also has personal experience with this pet loss topic. So she is going to be joining me on today's conversation. Lindy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know that you're a pet lover and have experienced pet loss and the devastation that it can be. And so I know that we're both excited to, delve into this topic and help equip people and maybe let them know why it feels so heavy. And maybe it's catching them off guard and why it feels so heavy for them, right? So yeah. I have my 5 lists here that we spoke about. So let's dive into the first one. Part of the reason this might be really hard for them is it may be the first time they're experiencing loss, right? Like certainly in their family.
Yeah, it could be the first time as an adult that they're experiencing loss, or it could be the first time that their children, if they have children, are experiencing loss. And so that kind of really does make it a big deal on how the parents and the family members, the adult family members, react to the loss and present it to the children, and how the children are taught by them how to deal with it. If it's just sort of brushed under the rug, or maybe they use euphemisms, or they even unfortunately think they're protecting the children and come up with little stories about what happened to the pet. That's not really serving the children in learning how to deal with grief at a relatively early age, or even further on. It really can help to set them up for how they will grieve later on in life, if this very first opportunity with a pet, if it is their first time, depending on how it's handled.
Right, for sure. And I mean, yeah, maybe as an adult, this might be the first time you're experiencing loss. And I think the first of everything is just the hardest, right? Your first breakup, your first heartbreak, your first, if you ever have a job loss, the first is always the hardest, just generally speaking. So if you're an adult and you haven't experienced close loss, and this is your first loss, it's going to make it harder. And then to your point, it could be the first loss you guys are experiencing as a family, and so seeing your kids sad and hurting and like trying to figure out as a family how you grapple with this can make it difficult, which actually is our #2 reason why it's a bigger deal. And you spoke to this already. You're really establishing the model for how your family is going to deal with grief. And I know we talk to so many adults who don't have good tools for dealing with grief.
Right.
Because when they were younger, their parents did not teach them how to openly talk about it and express their feelings. They were told that their dog went to live on the farm or whatever all the things are. And so they didn't have a model for sharing their sadness or mourning or, actually coming to a place of resolution about that. And so that can be another kind of reason why it is important to take extra time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and what can tend to happen too is we're not necessarily even talking about very young children, although obviously that can be the case. But if you have kids who go off to college and their childhood dog that they grew up with, or cat or whatever the pet is, gets ill and dies, or they have to make the decision to euthanize the pet, and they don't get a chance to say goodbye. and they're away. It's very important how you share that news and how you talk to them about it and encourage them that it's okay to talk about it rather than coming up again with some story as to what happened. I've had so many people, mainly my age group, say, oh, I went into the military or I went off to college, and my parents didn't even tell me that they like for a couple of months that they had to put the dog down or whatever.
Mm.
And that is, has much more impact on people's emotional response to grief, especially when they have another loss, like a loss of a person who's important to them at some point in their life, and they really have a hard time grappling with that. And it goes, all the times it goes back to that. They'll refer back to that incident. I think I struggle with this because when my dog died, my parents, or whatever the case may be. So
yeah. So if you're watching this video, please understand that this is an opportunity to learn how to grieve well, to learn how to grieve as a family, to learn how to talk about things and process things so that it doesn't get stuffed or disjointed or discombobulated. The third one that I'm super curious about, because I'm just going to be honest, I have judged in the past the people who are such a mess when they lose a pet. I'm like, because having lost a child and having lost my mom the way that I did, I'm like, pets are not people and it's nowhere near the same thing. But I find it interesting that now, because, my son did pass away and my daughter doesn't live at home, I got this dog, Gracie, that I've had for 6 months. And I in preparing for this video, I was like, man, I would be a mess if I lost Gracie. So I think one thing that's so important to talk about is that depending on what season of life you're in, and depending the role of the pet within your family, it really can become like a family member and or a child. And nowadays, so many people have emotional support pets, right? Where people are really dependent on their pets for not just companionship, but like emotional support. And that can be really devastating when you lose a pet like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you were saying, when you live alone, no matter what your age is, if your children, if you're, an empty nester and your kids have gone on with their lives and they don't live with you anymore, and you have pets or you decide to adopt a pet or pets, they do take on more, not I'm not saying more importance, but it's a different kind of feeling towards it. Like you said, it's not like they've replaced your children, but at the same time, you just get very attached. And this happens to older people too. It's big risk with seniors. Like if they are alone, if they've been widowed or divorced and are living by themselves, and they have a pet, having to give that pet up because maybe they can't care for it any longer, or something happens to the pet, it can be really devastating. And I think often people overlook that. For somebody in the more adult community like that, like, oh, well, you're whatever age and you've had a bunch of losses in your life. So what's the big deal? It's just your dog. I mean, that's afraid people say, oh, it's just a dog. It's just a cat. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
But even if it's not formally an emotional support pet, still that pet is there for emotional support and just companionship, even companionship. I mean, we know the dog's not going to talk back to us, but we talk to it anyway. So,
right.
Deal. Or your habits, your routines, you build your routines around, the dog's schedule and what he or she needs, or cats or whatever. And then that just all goes away, just like it would with a person. All of a sudden, everything has changed. And it can be very, very overwhelming for people. And then again, they feel like they can't really talk about it.
And I agree. I'm not in the elderly category yet. But I'm a single person. It's just me and Gracie, and she is my companion. My routine is so much around her and our walks and what we do. And so, that can be really devastating. So we just want to share all of this to say that if you're really struggling, if you're really feeling the weight of this and maybe feel like you're crazy, or, we just want to say, like, we hear you, we see you. A lot of this heaviness that you're feeling is justified, right? And vocalizing it and coming up with whatever your plan looks like for you in order to move through it is a worthwhile endeavor. The last thing, the number 5 that we have on our list here is, and I know this, the guilt that often comes with pet loss, because most likely, if you've lost a pet, it's usually one of 2 ways. Either 3 ways. It could just be old age, just literal old age, and they just die peacefully in their sleep. Or they have an illness that they contend with for however long, right? And you're watching your pet kind of slowly deteriorate and maybe be in pain of some sort. And then most pet owners have to come to that place of decision of when do they want, are they just suffering so much? Or it could be a traumatic accident that they were hit by a car or they choked on something or whatever. And in all of those scenarios, it's just ripe for us to feel guilty or responsible, right? Like, just like with our kids, we feel like it's our job to protect and keep our pets healthy and happy for as long as possible, right? So can you speak to that a little bit about how people might be dealing with guilt after pet loss?
Well, I think because a lot of times people don't talk about it ahead of time in their families. Like, it's really important to have that discussion, even when you first adopt an animal. Like, let's say you adopt a pet and they're a kitten or a puppy, like they're young, or even an older pet. It's really important, especially if you don't live alone, like if it's a family situation or you're in a couple or whatever, to talk to the other person about it. Because I've also had people tell me that, like my spouse or my partner had a very different idea about what we should do with our dog when he or she got ill or whatever. So it's very important to talk about that ahead of time, well before there's any illness or anything, so that when these things happen, because you think about it, you're going to be emotional. You're going to be in the middle of it, trying to make these pretty big decisions about what to do with your animal, depending on what your veterinarian might tell you about their prognosis or their chances, or what they might be dealing with symptoms and all those kind of things. So it's important to talk about it ahead of time, to be prepared in some way, even though in general we don't like doing that in our culture. But it's just as important with our pets as it is with ourselves and the people that we care about. And that, I think that can kind of circumvent people feeling guilty about having made the wrong decisions. Because when you do make the decisions when you're emotional, sometimes you go back and say, gosh, should I have done that? Did I ask the right questions? Maybe we did it too soon. Honestly, even with me, this is a personal thing. I've owned a lot of pets over the years. I'm a big animal lover. And recently I had a dog who was with me for 15 and a half years. Adopted him when he was a little puppy. And I love all my animals, but he was kind of like, the one I had the closest bond with, I think, out of all my pets I've ever had. And he became ill with cancer and, was doing well for a few months, and then he started to decline. And I thought my husband and I talked about it. I really thought I was going to know when it was time. And my vet had to tell me. My vet had to say, man, listen, I know he's still eating and everything. He kind of seems like himself, but really, think about like how he's been acting. And he had a wound on his face from the skin cancer. And I had to think about it for about a week or so before I could kind of wrap my mind around, hey, the time, I knew this was coming, but the time is here. And the way I was able to handle it, with having him euthanized at home and the vet being so supportive and everything, I don't have any regrets about it. I mean, as much as I miss him, and I still miss him, and I'm probably always going to miss him, I don't feel guilty about how that went. So it is really important to think about these things ahead of time and talk about them, even if it's an accident situation that's going to happen suddenly and you have to make a decision on the spot. Oh, this is really bad. Maybe I should just, maybe we should, even it's particularly hard for a younger animal. I mean, Rudy was, like I said, over 15 years old. So, but with a younger pet, it's particularly difficult to do that. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the guilt can come in, just feeling like you didn't make the right decisions. You didn't take care of them well enough. Maybe I should have gone to a different vet. I mean, you can just question yourself, right and left, just like you said, just like you would with your children.
Right. And as we know from working with folks, like that doesn't lead anywhere productive, right?
No, so not at all.
So now we're transitioning to the tips. If you have watched this whole time, and I just want to give you a quick tip, if guilt is the thing, to just take some time to forgive yourself for whatever you're feeling guilty for. And if you need a statement to meditate on, a solid statement is, I did the best I could with the information I had at the time, right? Like, to just, because you did the best you could in that moment. And so think and remember that. But also, as Lindy said, if you get a pet in the future, maybe from this experience, look back with hindsight and make some decisions ahead of time about what you would or wouldn't do. Have that written down or have a discussion, so that when emotions are high, when you're in the middle of, potentially trauma or crisis, you have a game plan. It's already figured out. So you don't have to shoulda, coulda, woulda, second guess, all that kind of stuff. But the other thing we want to share, the number one tip for dealing with pet loss. Lindy, what's the number one thing people can do?
Talk about it.
Talk about
it. If you feel more comfortable seeking out other people in your life who are pet owners who you feel would empathize more, then that's fine. Talk to them. I mean, there's even a lot of animal shelters and veterinarian hospitals or offices offer support groups now. So there's actually support groups for pet grief. So you might want to seek those out if there's not anybody in your immediate circle who you feel comfortable. But it's really important to talk about it. I mean, honestly, even social media, that's one of the good things, about social media is that people are very open about their pets and when their pets are ill or their pets have died. And that's a great place to either give or find support. So even if people don't react positively because maybe they don't think it's a big deal, just talk about it. Just like you would if you lost a person, seek out the people who you feel are going to be the most supportive and empathetic, and those are the people you talk to about it, because you'd probably be surprised at how much they might have to share and how much it would help.
Yeah, 100%. Because we know that neurologically speaking and emotionally speaking, the things that we keep in our mind and we don't let out, they actually carry much more weight. So you can lessen the intensity of the feeling just by talking about it or even writing it out. You want to get a place for those feelings and thoughts to be processed, right? And we also know that in order to resolve grief, what is required is mourning, right? So when you go through the process of mourning and talking about the loss, feeling the loss, coming to some sort of conclusion, that is going to help you to not feel the heavy weight of grief. So I hope that this discussion was encouraging for you. I hope it was informative for you. Lindy and I are actually going to be doing several other videos around pet loss. So I encourage you to check out our other videos. Hopefully they will be helpful to you as well. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for tips like this and others. Until next time, guys, we will see ya.